digital demo day. Next up, we have our last presentation of the day, which is Portalarium. And we have with us the executive producer of Portalarium, Starr, as well as the CEO and creative director, Richard Garriott. So remember, if you have any questions for them, please feel free to type them into the panel on the right-hand side of your screen. But with that, gentlemen, I'll let you take it away.
Hello, I'm Starr. I'm the executive producer of Shroud of the Avatar at Portalarium. Glad to be here.
And hi, this is Richard Garriott. I'm CEO and creative director, and we are thrilled you stuck around here with us to talk about Portalarium, our game Shroud of the Avatar, and our imminent launch of the game, and our intention to grow as a publisher, and hoping you might want to join us on that journey.
So I'll just jump right in. Some highlights about us. We're an all-star team with a Hall of Fame track record. Richard, who just introduced himself, is in the Hall of Fame of the International Game Developers, the Academy of Interactive Arts and Science, among others. We're close to releasing our newest game, which is called Shroud of the Avatar. Most of the features are complete, and we are in early access testing. We have over 60,000 volunteer testers who have logged about 3 million hours of gameplay so far. Over the last 3 years, while we've been in testing, we've had 100% software uptime, minus scheduled maintenance time. And we are currently the second largest crowd-funded game in the US to date. We've raised over $11 million in crowd funds. And our goal is to transform role-playing games again, as we have done in the past. The market opportunity for games is there are 1.2 billion active gamers globally projected to have generated about 100 billion in revenue just in 2016, with over a 6.5% projected growth rate. Richard, also known as Lord British, and the Ultima Online team, of which many of us in Portalarium are from, we created the global MMO market, which just by itself is projected to have generated close to $20 billion again in 2016, with a 9.5% projected growth rate, with tens of millions of active users. We have a large and rabidly loyal fan base. Ultima Online, which is a game we created, was one of the very first MMOs, and it was also one of it was actually the very first MMO to surpass 1 million users. Again, Shroud of the Avatar, we're the second largest crowdfunded game in the US. We've raised over $11.3 million in crowd funds, initially from a Kickstarter we did in 2013, where we raised almost $2 million. And since then, we've raised over $9 million directly from our website. We have over 64,000 backers who pre-ordered the game and have been testing and playing the game. And the average value per backer so far is $220. So that's a very large average revenue per user. Our business model is that we plan to release episodic content approximately annually, and between that we do monthly releases. Episode 1 will be available on PC, Mac, and Linux for a $40 base game that gives you full access, and then we have a limited free trial version as well. Try before you buy. We also have an add-on store where you can buy things for as little as a few dollars all the way up to, we have items priced at $12,000, and yes, people spend that much money. Episodes 2 through 5 will expand beyond the PC and go into console and mobile, and we plan to have a new episode launch approximately every 12 to 18 months. So just a little background on our leadership. Richard is our CEO and creative director. He's been in the industry basically as long as there has been a video game industry, over 40 years. He wrote one of the very first computer role-playing games in 1979, a game called The Calibeth. He also created a role-playing game series called Ultima, which is one of the longest-running RPG franchises ever. He also happens to be the first second-generation American astronaut. Myself, Starr, I'm the executive producer. I've been in the industry about 25 years. My first game was a game called Ultima Online, which was one of the very first MMOs. I also, for several years, ran the virtual world studio at Disney. So we have a pretty deep bench. So the investment opportunity is to put money with an all-star team with a Hall of Fame track record. We've been doing content releases monthly for over 40 months, always on time, the last Thursday of the month. We have, as we mentioned, a highly valuable, active, and loyal fan base. We plan to do a commercial release at the end of the year, and we're doing this equity crowdfund to help fund that launch and expand our operations. And now we're to have time for questions, I hope.
Awesome. Thanks so much for bringing that presentation to us. We do have a few minutes for questions left, actually. So just a reminder, if anyone is just logging in, if you do have a question, you can go ahead and enter it into the Citrix Solutions box on the right-hand side of your screen. But the first question is, what is the market potential of a best-selling game, and where do you anticipate you might reach if you're not going to be one of those top best-selling games?
Yeah, so this is Richard. So, you know, these days, I mean, I'm sure most listeners are aware that the video game industry has grown to become the dominant entertainment medium and is now substantially larger than, you know, books, televisions, and movies combined. And so the top-selling games in a year will often generate as much as $1 billion. So, you know, we're into extremely large amounts of money. So. And while we would love to go that far, our vision is much more modest. You know, we've already mentioned that we have 65,000 backers already that have just found us through the crowdfunding kinds of activities. But if you look at the history of our games have always been very solid sellers. And if you just forecast forward to, frankly, even just 100,000 or 200,000 players that are, you know, might average, you know, say $10 a month, that on a yearly basis would immediately take us to 12 million or 24 million in revenue at what we think are very modest targets. And so, you know, while the high ends are very lofty, we have strong confidence we can make a very strong business even at much more modest numbers.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, you know, if you add up the number of Ultima fans and Ultima Online fans and Origin Systems fans, which was the original game studio most of us came from, you know, we at least have a fan base that's somewhere between 2 and 10 million that we haven't even tapped yet.
Makes sense. Thank you. For future episodes in your game, so gather that you're developing what you're calling episode 1 right now. Can you detail the funding model for that, and what happens to the people that backed episode 1 as far as subscription to those future episodes?
Well, let me just first talk about how the game will operate in lieu of these additional episodes. So everybody who has purchased episode 1 will forever, you know, have the ability to traverse that territory and play with the stories that are included. Episode 2 is additional land masses and additional story content that, to be able to play in that additional land mass and play with that additional content, you will have had to purchase episode 2. And so that would ostensibly be a similar price point and therefore also a similar model to the original release. So you could imagine that if, you know, for episode 1, people are paying $40 as a base and, you know, maybe $100 to $200 in their lifetime through episode 1, they would do that again for episode 2 and then again for 3 and 4 and 5.
All right, thank you. Can you talk a little bit about the competitive landscape as far as your game, unique features and selling points of your game, but also talk about other games or developers or publishers that you see are similar to you and how you kind of differentiate from them?
You know, I'll take a first crack at this too. Starr may have some things he wants to add. You know, if you, the category of role-playing games, obviously gaming is huge, even role-playing games is quite a large category. But if you look back at the history of role-playing games, the games that we have created, we believe, have historically been in a unique style and compared to a lot of the other very popular games that people are familiar with. There are games, some of the most popular ones were called EverQuest some years back, and World of Warcraft most recently. And in most role-playing games, and especially online role-playing games, the players who play it are first and foremost combatants. Everyone who's playing usually is a combatant, and even though they might have other things they can do, like run around and craft things or run, you know, have some extra skills, your primary method of play is combat. And in Shroud of the Avatar, we're creating a very different kind of game. It's a game which has much more of what is often referred to as a sandbox feel, where while lots of people are involved in combat, people also can live very rich, detailed lives in a virtual world. And so whether that means you role play as a shopkeeper or a craftsman, a very, very large percentage of our users do play in very deep simulations that are not explicitly combat. And so it adds a richness and a diversity to gameplay in our world that I think is missing in others. And maybe, Starr, you can mention something about our selectively multiplayer.
Yeah, the other thing that's fairly unique about our game is most role-playing games are either a single-player game that you play by yourself, not connected to the internet, or they are a multiplayer game that you play with others while you're connected to the internet. One thing that differentiates our game, and that's pretty much unique, there really isn't another example in the market right now, is that our game is what we call selective multiplayer, where you can play the game you basically have a dial that lets you play all the way from, I'm going to play the game by myself offline as a single player role-playing game, or I'm going to log onto the server and I'm going to play with everyone online, or I'm going to play still connected to the server, but I want to play by myself, but I want to still see what other people are doing, but I just want to be still by myself. Or I want to play with just my friends, just the people I know, and go on an adventure party with them, but I don't want to see any strangers. And we call that selective multiplayer. And there really isn't a single product on the marketplace that allows you to dial back and forth all the way to offline, all the way to open online like that.
Got it. Very interesting. We only have a couple more minutes here, but I was wondering if you could talk about the long-term plans for Portalarium as a company, and possibly touch on the exit opportunities that you see in the future, and the timelines towards certain liquidity events that you think might be possible in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. So the reason why we're here with SeedInvest now is that for the last few years, for 40 months of releases, or 42 months of releases now, we have our modest 30-person staff has been 100% focused on product development. And so now that we can see the light at the end of the tunnel, and we have a strong core base of players, it's time to grow into from just a pure developer into a developer and publisher. So that's what we're here doing this equity, this registration CF equity round with and for, is to make that transition and grow the player base and have the funds needed to not only staff up those new departments, but place advertisements and other things to get the word out and bring in, expand to our natural customer base. That's sort of phase one. If you look at us as a company, a lot of us have worked together through multiple companies previously. Our first company, Origin, we sold to Electronic Arts. Our second company, Destination Games, we sold to a Korean firm, NCSoft. And this is sort of round 3 for a bunch of us. And so we are used to creating companies that, we like our old motto from Origin, which was a moniker we called "We Create Worlds." And we believe that is our moniker as developers, and the kind of developers we also hope to work with in the future. And so as we grow as a publisher, we hope that we will bring other offerings to the table, both internally developed and externally developed. And the last thing you mentioned was a monetization event for investors. This is not our first rodeo. We've already built and sold 2 companies, and so we hope we can grow this one as strongly and as handily as we have our previous 2 iterations. And so that would mean we will be over time looking for other global partners to help us with distribution, to eventually potentially merge with, or ultimately to sell to. I think the probability is low that we would do something like an independent IPO. We're at least very far in scale from that being anytime soon. But within the next few years, we would hope to provide a monetization event for our early investors. Okay, great.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we are out of time for the day, but thank you to Starr and Richard for joining us today.
Thank you.
And thank you to